Welcome back, everyone. I'm so excited to be with my guest today. Her name is Chelsy. She is a somatic sexologist and intimacy coach for women, but she's taught hundreds of men and women how to be mindful in love and pleasure. Chelsy, welcome to the Inner Beauty Code. I'm so excited to speak with you today.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I'm super excited too.
Well, tell us more about what you do.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So my main focus is I love saying it this way because it's like, what are you talking about? I really love to help women have wet, wild, and divine relationships, specifically with their man, but it doesn't have to be a male counterpart. But that's something that I've personally just had really amazing experiences with my own personal life. And, we end up having like this relationship with our past where our mess becomes our message. And that's very much what's kind of happened for me.
Well, I need to know more about what that means. Your becomes your message. What exactly does that mean? And maybe, tell us a little bit about what led you to become a somatic sexologist.
Absolutely. So for me, what that means is, allowing men and women to have really juicy, intimate relationship, meaning that whatever sex ends up being for them. So one thing that I find that, just our entire society as a whole, we have these implicit relationship in our intimate life, meaning that there's assumptions, there's hidden beliefs, there's expectations even on how sex should be for us. And for each individual person, it's actually different. So, in unpacking this in relationship, we actually end up having better and wetter sex because it ends up being more true and authentic to ourselves. And I don't know if you ever had like experiences personally where you've kind of touched this place of what I like to call the divine, where you start to feel and completely uninhibited and connected to something a little bit more beautiful, not only during sex, but also just in relationship itself. When we're in this like this free flowing of emotions rather than they're all kind of like locked and blocked in our systems. It's not tense. It's not like this tit for tat and like this conflict within the relationship. It's more expressive, and we feel really open and available to share from a vulnerable place. So that's kind of this texture that I like to guide women into so that they can have these moments more consistently in their relationships. So what honestly led me to this place is, oh my gosh, how many years ago now? I've been asked this quite a few times this week, evidently, and I'm like, oh, I don't even know how long ago it's been, but it hasn't been that long, I don't think. But I think maybe about 5 years ago, I was in this place in my own relationship, and even my job, even for that matter. I just felt like something was missing. And I hear this so often for so many other individuals who like just like before they start stepping into the path of sexuality or just wanting to just know more about themselves and their relationships. There's just like this, there just feels like something's missing. Like, is this it? Is this all life is about? Is this all that I'm going to get from my sex? And that's kind of what led me into the aspects of going into somatic sexology. And I didn't really go into it initially be like, oh, I just want to have better sex. That was never really my intention. It was just like this texture of knowing like, I want more depth. I want more substance and more meaning. I even want to understand what my own purpose was. It was like this really deep inquiry of trying to know myself. That was kind of where I started to go into it. And then, fast forward, I got certified and started coaching and was able to really go on my own inner transformation. And that was able to lead me into experiencing more consistently what ecstasy means and like bliss and just this free flowing experience of feeling connected, profoundly connected to my man in and outside of the bedroom. And I'm just like, whoa, okay, this is it. Like this has got to be why, not only myself, but just like, this is why we're here. Like that feeling of feeling connected, not only to ourself, but our partner, and even expanding that out to our family and our community. And so that's kind of what led me onto this path of just experiencing just this sense of meaning and depth in my life.
I'm so happy that you just shared that because it resonates so deeply with
Mm.
me. And why, I mentioned to you that I want to go in this field as well. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
I think I had the same kind of experience with sexual in my sexual history where I'm like, why am I even doing this act? Because it's like, especially if you're not having an orgasm when you're having sex, it's almost like, and I know now that that's not the only way to receive and experience pleasure. However, but when you're doing the act and you're like, wait a minute, this didn't even feel like it had anything more. Like I want depth and wanted depth too. And I know there's a lot of women out there that don't even think about their own pleasure when they're in a
Mm-hmm.
relationship or by themselves and aren't comfortable enough. So thank you for sharing that and for educating women on this topic, because I think it's such a taboo subject still. And
Mm-hmm.
no one, I have said this before on the podcast, like this is something that no one teaches us about. No one teaches us
Mm-hmm.
about intimacy. No one teaches us about sex. And it's kind of up to us to figure it out for ourselves. And I think a lot of people are walking around in relationship and hit a wall, and they're not able to maybe even explore or try to find a way to
Yeah.
make it better, and they almost give up. And I think the way our society is going right now, where it's so disconnected, that people are so willing to throw something or someone away because they're just going to move on to the next person that can give them that initial thrill, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this is something that I really want our listeners during this conversation to walk away, maybe even questioning how they can improve this in their lives, or to have some provocation for them moving forward in their own life. So, what is something that you see in your work that's common amongst women and amongst couples when it comes to barriers to intimacy, or maybe lack of knowledge, how to give and receive pleasure?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's a great question because you may or may not have heard of this like stat where it's considered like the orgasm gap, where it just means that one person is either having an orgasm, the other person isn't, or there's just like, it's just not happening for anybody. And the one thing that is important for us to first understand, and there's many layers to this, but the first aspect is one, just really understanding anatomy. Like this
Mm-hmm.
is just like blanket statement. This is just how our anatomy functions. And then from there, the next layer is understanding, okay, like what feels good to me individually, because there can also be a lot of assumptions. I kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier, just like these implicit things that are kind of like floating around in us, that we think the way sex should be, or we think the way that pleasure should be, or there could simply just be a fear around pleasure itself. So there are like different layers. So like the first layer I'll just share like with anatomy, understanding that women would be, I like this analogy of women are more like water and men are more like fire. So it takes a woman for arousal to build up, like just like waiting for water to boil. You got to turn the heat on, bring in the fire, but you need to allow that water time to boil. It just doesn't go 0 to 100 just like that. And
Mm-hmm.
for a women's anatomy, it takes time for blood flow to flow into the vulva. And something that I like to guide women into is their own self pleasure practice in front of a mirror, specifically to witness how their genitals actually become engorged and when the blood flow starts flowing and the way their clitoris starts to grow a little bit, just like a penis does. So like some people may think like, oh, like why, what's the point of that? Like that just seems so basic or whatever. But you'd be surprised if you've never witnessed that within yourself, how intimate that is, and all the revelations and even the breakthroughs that come through. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even know my vulva could be that color. I didn't even, like just little things like that. And it's important because this is allowing us to break free from a lot of the stigmas of, okay, I should be ready to go like a man's body, or I should be completely wet and wild on like immediately. But no, my love, it takes time. Watch what your body does. So that's like the first step that I recommend all women to do. Because for me, when I first went into this work, I had never looked at myself in that way before. And that may, someone may have, but I would almost challenge in the way that we would have done it had it wasn't intentional. Were you breathing slowly? Were you aware of each subtle sensation? Because often, again, we're just like have all this sexual energy, and we're not trained to be mindful in our sexual energy. And that's a really big piece of my work specifically, is helping people to slow down and become aware of who they are and how they are when their arousal comes through and their desire and all these things. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is, just getting really clear on, okay, what actually feels good to me outside of trying to perform for my lover or please my lover. That's a really big thing for a lot of women because, whether we've been conditioned our entire life to be the good girl or the cool girl or the motherly figure, there's these characters that women kind of take on a lot of the time because of, like, for example, for me, for anyone that wants to like try to like touch the texture of this, like for me growing up, I was a middle child. However, I took on kind of like the mothering role for my two younger siblings. So I took on a lot of responsibility early on. I even imagined myself as a little girl, like I was the mom to my little brother because we had like a 10-year difference. Mm-hmm. And I know like for so many women that's happened where they've got a lot of responsibility. They've taken care of others their entire life. And how I like to look at our sexuality is that sex is really a metaphor of life. How we do sex is how we do everything. Because, we kind of show up in these places and we are who we are. Just simply that all our habits and the way that we think, it's all in that place. So these catering, this catering aspect, when we go into the bedroom, we stop experiencing what we're actually feeling. Like if something doesn't feel good, I'm like, oh no, how's my partner though? Are they actually having a good time? And they'll ignore these subtle responses in our body. Like, okay, that doesn't feel good. Oh, no, slow down. Oh, no, maybe I'm not ready just yet. Like our body will continuously send us signals on these things that are happening. Yet, when we're so focused on our partner and how they're feeling and if they're having a good time, we're no longer feeling pleasure anymore. So sex is not good anymore. It just simply doesn't feel good. And we bypass all these things that tell us like, hey, maybe do this way, don't do that, right? So these two aspects are just kind of like these common ways that we've been conditioned to just show up in life. And thus we bring it into the bedroom too.
Yeah. And I think that what you just mentioned too about being more concerned about what's going on with our partner than ourselves is something that I definitely that was definitely a hurdle for me to get over. Mm-hmm. But it's still something to this day that I have to, no matter what is going, I had this not long ago where even just the beginning of sex when you're experiencing penetration as a woman, it can be, depending on the size of your partner, it could be, you can't just thrust it in there, even if you are warmed up. It takes a little time, and even being able to say, wait, like, I know there are women that can't say that too. So just, even being able to voice and communicate what you want is such an important part of it. And
mm-hmm.
It sounds like self-exploration is really going to help you be able to voice and communicate what it is that feels good to you.
Yeah. There's a saying that one of my mentors has where, I don't know if you watch basketball or anything like that, but it's like the players, the NBA players, they practice their layups like thousands and thousands of times. And when it comes to the actual playoffs, like they know how to do a layup. So the intent here is just to understand that, like, we can't go into sex expecting to know how to to do the playoffs, aka have an orgasm, if we haven't actually done the reps prior. So self-practice, self-pleasure is a real formal thing for us to do, not only to explore within ourselves, but ultimately to come together, literally come together with our partners later and to experience these wet, wild, and divine things that we actually deep down in our heart, in our sex, actually crave. I have this deep belief that there's this like general kind of like thing, and as well as like there's a lot of stats. I can't quote them right now, and I don't want to quote them because I can't source them at this moment, but where there's more and more women who are struggling with low libido. And there's also this like thing where you get into long-term relationship, and not only do you lose the spark, but it's typically like the woman that doesn't want to have sex anymore. There's like that stigma of like the I can't think of the right word, but like this like shrouded or this reserved woman, and then the man's like always grumpy, like, oh, she never wants to have sex. Like there's like this this like this societal image we believe is true, but my deep belief, thank you, stereotype. I couldn't think of the right words. Thank you. Yeah, my deep belief is it's because we're not having the kind of sex that's worth having, right? So like ultimately, our libido is a reflection of the quality of sex that we're having and how much pleasure we are experiencing and how connected we are to our bodies. So when we get to these places where we're connected to our body, we actually know what we like, we can say what we like, we can go into the bedroom with our lovers and actually have a good experience that makes us crave more and more of it. So yeah, that's what I'm super passionate about, because I see it. I saw it happen within myself. Like I'm with my partner now, almost 12 years. And when I started to go into this work, it was about like halfway in our relationship, and we had zero intimacy. Like we would do the typical Netflix and chill. There was no actual chill. It was just like Netflixing marathons, and like there was no talking, there was no connection, like we used to have. And it just got to this place of just like, neither of us actually really wanted to have sex anymore. Even him, it was just kind of like this like dead bedroom scenario. And fast forward going through this work, I was able to truly go on a solo journey. It had nothing even to do with him at first. It had everything to do with how my relationship with my sex was, the beliefs I had about sex, what was I told growing up about sex. And then truly owning that for myself, like, oh, no, that's not even true for me. This is actually what I want. This is what it feels for me. This is what I want to say about it. And I was able to experience what self-pleasure did for me. And again, on a solo journey, kind of what I described earlier about getting connected to my body and the sensations and not pushing away things that maybe felt a little uncomfortable, getting a little bit curious about them, connecting with sensations that felt good, and then amplifying that. So actually, now that I'm on this like tangent, there's actually a really simple practice that is like so. I always find that the simple practices are the best ones. So if you connect with your body and you're someone that you haven't maybe felt a lot of pleasure, maybe you're a little disconnected, you're feeling a little bit numb. Something I recommend is just kind of taking some deep breaths, getting a little relaxed, letting go of the external, and just tracking what feels like a yes in your body. And when you connect with that yes, literally just going, yes, and just seeing how that feels for you. And that's one simple way to just start to learn what pleasure is for you, and outside of a partner, outside of any external influences. So that's what I started to do more and more and more. And then I got to this place of just feeling so juicy and so turned on in my own body. I came to my partner with that respect. And what's so fascinating and what I just love about men, but obviously my partner, but just men in general, is that they're very receptive to that. When they see a woman is just like, yes, yes, they're like, okay, I'll go right into that. Like they naturally have this very penetrative force that gravitates to our yes. So being more responsive in that respect and, amplifying that, yes, 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 that is really what allows couples to create this generative experience of locating what ecstasy and those feel good sensations are for them. So I don't remember what your question was, but I kind of went on a tangent.
No, it's okay. I don't remember either because I was listening to what you're saying, but
Yeah.
I'm happy that you brought that up because that's why I also think women are the ones that, not that I don't want to educate men too, but I think that women are the ones that can hold or they need to start realizing to take your power back sexually, because your partner is not a psychic either. Your partner doesn't know, your partner hasn't been taught how to pleasure a woman a lot of times, unless they had a girlfriend that was very communicative. And even then, she's probably not doing deep work on this area. So I think women, if you start to get to know your own bodies, you can then be like the vessel that like teaches the man how to be a better lover
Exactly.
for you. And if you know how to communicate that, it would make things so rich. And that's exactly why I love having this conversation with you now too, is because I am definitely on an exploration to go where you've gone with your own intimacy, because I think it's so important to, why would you be skimming the surface of something that
Yeah.
is such an important part of a relationship with a partner? And not to get like doom and gloom here, but again, this if you've been in a relationship, so it might be different, and maybe until you started doing this work. But for single people, it's really hard these days to
Mm-hmm.
connect. And I think the more work you can do on yourself and the more that you can create that deeper intimacy with your partner through the work that you're doing on yourself as well, it might start to change the tide of like the dating scene these days. I'm sure you have single
Oh,
friends
yeah.
that tell you it's like
Yep.
really challenging out there sometimes.
Yes, 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 yeah. No, absolutely, like 100%. And I do, and this is another like deep belief that I have, and maybe there are some old school aspects to me, but I do feel like I'm pretty innovative because I like to think about like, okay, well, just because we're in like doom and gloom or there's something going on right
Yeah.
now, like there's always a solution. There's always another
Yeah.
way forward. So I deeply believe that because of technology, this has really affected just the way our brain functions are. Like technology has been around, I think maybe about eight. Like, it's a very short period. It's less than 100 years, and it is rapidly growing so freaking fast. Like I don't even know. Like I've never. I think maybe Tinder's been around 7 years. So I was in a relationship at the time. I never needed to do it. I was never part of that era.
Yeah. It's been
But
yeah.
not that long though.
Like
It really
12
hasn't been that
years.
long.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So really not that long. And that is challenging for humans that, as fast as our brains and learning and development can happen, our bodies take time to adapt and to function in this way of being.
Yeah.
It's also creating this distracted pandemic, literally this distraction where you mentioned it a little bit earlier about hopping into a relationship, whatever happens, maybe you guys have a disagreement, and because of the access and the way
Mhm.
that the nature of our mind being so distracted, we will quickly go to the next thing that seems good or
Yeah.
better at the moment, where the grass is greener,
Mhm.
ideally, is what someone would think. So they drop that person. When in This is also another deep belief of mine, like when you get into a relationship, until you have your first real disagreement or conflict, you're not actually in a relationship, because you have to learn the rupture repair cycle. That's how you know when this relationship is either going to be worth it or this person is going to be willing and able to grow with you. Because
Mhm.
our relationships at the end of the day are this really beautiful aspect of learning deeply about ourselves and growing and getting over our own inhibitions and neurosis of like, oh, I'm better than you, or like, you know what I mean? Like it really is very collaborative. So that's like one aspect here. And I do deeply believe like if in this, I don't mean this as like a shaming aspect, but it comes out this way. It's like if you don't have a form of practice that allows you to be present, still, and aware, of your own inner landscape, you're doomed in relationship. And you're also going to be doomed in sex because it's all about being present with sensation. And I'm sure you've heard this common complaint. Like I've had this complaint too, where you're kind of going through sex, you're kind of going through the motions, and you're like, oh, the groceries. Oh my God, I didn't throw out the trash. Like these are just normal things that happen because that's just the nature of being human. We have to get over ourselves. We have to get over, our own reservations and just the way our mind works in order to actually have a really meaningful connection. So yeah, that's just kind of how I feel about that. And it really takes a lot of responsibility and accountability if you want something meaningful, especially like a relationship, and especially to have like earth shattering, like take me to the divine kind of orgasms. Like it is a commitment, like because you have to get out of your head. And our society is like so prone to like label like I have anxiety or like I have ADHD, and it's like, okay, like yes, okay, and let's try to work with that. Like how can you overcome your own inhibitions and just find some stillness and really be with that. Because honestly, like no one's got a still mind. You're never going to turn off your thoughts. It's really about like how are you going to be with that and just allow them to kind of just like trickle over like water, so you can be more connected with your body and connected with this human right in front of you. Do the same breath.
Yeah, and that's what, I think ladies and gents listening out there, if why wouldn't you want to have, if you're going to have sex, like why not have the mind-blowing, earth-shattering bliss experience? I mean, sometimes every single time, you don't have to spend hours doing it, but the more, you get to know your body and realize that there's more to it, wouldn't you want to? Because I mean, it's something that every relationship has to have. And most people are out there looking to connect that way, or maybe they've mistaken connection for the physical act, and like sex has become very interactional. It's very much like, let me just get off and like, figure out whoever's be available for me to do it, when again it's part of like that disconnection between our mind and our body that's happening because of technology and just the way our society is going. So yeah, it's all really important. And on that note, I wanted to know, like, what are the biggest fears that you see people having when they come to you, men and women?
The biggest one for sure is just a fear of intimacy. And that usually stems because there was something that happened, when we were a kid, a young boy, young girl, that told us that it's not safe to be who you are. It's not safe to, be in your innocence. It's not safe to speak your truth. Like there was something that happened, whether that been with like your primary caregiver, or maybe it was just with a friend group that just simply laughed at you. Like it could have been something so subtle, or it could have been a repeated events, which likely it's more likely repeated because let's face it, kids can be a little harsh. And it's not uncommon for our caregivers just to be too busy and too distracted themselves to really see what's going on with their kids and be present with them, and to provide them with the love, care, and protection that they needed. So from that aspect, we develop this fear of intimacy. We develop these fears in relationship that tell us that it's not safe to bare our heart. It's not safe to be in our vulnerability. It's not safe even to just, be in our eroticism. So from these places, we end up developing all of these shells around our heart and the truth of who we are. And it just feels safer to be in that place. So it makes it much more challenging to be like, oh yeah, okay, I actually love being tied up. And because we're afraid, like, okay, that feels a little taboo and someone's going to shame me or something, just something like that. Or, we want to go to our partner and admit to them, like, the way that we've been having sex, that jackhammering sex, it doesn't work for me. Right. And that could feel really
Yeah.
scary for a lot of people because they're afraid to hurt their partner's feeling, kind of going back to the catering, but it's also just a really vulnerable place to admit from the truth of your heart what you actually want. We're taught so often that our needs aren't valid, We're taught that
Mhm.
it's like a weakness to show our needs. So coming from that place and expressing what we need can feel risky, it can feel like death in our nervous systems. So that vulnerability can create such a block in leading up and creating the relationships and the sex that truly is going to be mind-blowing and reach the orgasms, if you will, or just having more pleasure and creating the context that matters for our pleasure.
And I think that, just speaking from experience of people that I know and just how I used to be before starting to learn more about this stuff and
Mm-hmm.
speaking to sexologists, I don't think people know what exactly it means to what pleasure means. Like, yeah, we
Mm.
think that it's mostly the act of sex and having the orgasm. And most of the
Mm-hmm.
time, it's not really that rich, like all encompassing full experience. It's that it could be. It's very
Mm-hmm.
surface. And I
Mm-hmm.
think yeah, so maybe, like, I don't know if there's a way to just educate people right
Yeah.
now more
Mm-hmm.
about what it means to be, what's the difference between just a interactional experience of sex and real intimate pleasure that can be had.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Great question. Yeah. So one aspect is expanding what sex means to us, expanding like what that would be. So typically it's just like penetration and people think like, oh, that's
Mhm.
just sex and that's it. And to be very frank, that can get boring and that it
Mhm.
could be very short lived. And we're just like, okay, what's even the
Yeah.
point? We kind of start
Yeah.
questioning what is this? So
Yeah.
expanding our sexual repertoire and what sex can be. There's foreplay, there's different kinks, there's like the whole BDSM world. Like, it doesn't mean you have to go that route, but just understanding that something as simple as the way you speak to someone can be incredibly erotic. And there's such thing as called oral, which is all about words, and just like speaking. And that in itself can bring energetic orgasms for people. They can have
Mhm.
breast orgasms. So just expanding your repertoire and what you understand this like sexual acts can be. There's a whole bunch of like free checklists for people that can go through like all these different kinds of things you can do. I can also give you a free resource as well that has like a big thing that people can kind of go through. It's like a yes, no, maybe kind of thing that allows people to like experience like, okay, like maybe I want to try that, or that's a hell no for me, or like, yes, I definitely want to try that. So it just kind of
Yeah.
goes through a whole menu of items to expand someone's sexual repertoire. And then, sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, and we could put that in the show notes, maybe, just the
Okay.
questionnaire, maybe the link. The question was just just teaching. Let's expand
Oh.
people's knowledge about what pleasure
Mhm.
actually is. Like you mentioned a few. So just for everyone to clarify, the experience of pleasure and orgasm can start way before you even get into the bedroom. Like for me,
Mhm,
I
mhm.
know that the buildup of sexual tension, even when you're out on the
Yes.
date, like the way that your partner speaks to you, like the anticipation leading up to like actually being able to physically touch each other starts like
Mhm,
that's a turn on for me. So I
mhm.
like getting to know your own, what actually really turns you on rather than just the physical touch, because everybody has a different way that they're turned on as well. And understanding that, then you can teach your partner. But you just mentioned
Yes, yes, exactly. Yes, thank you for reminding me. And just understanding kind of like what pleasure, the makeup of it, kind of what you're saying here. Understanding that it's not necessarily, even if one thing worked for you last time, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you again.
mm-hmm,
So, and by understanding that it requires context for something to feel good. So, like, if, for example, kind of going back to this oral thing that I mentioned, I could say, like, oh, you're a dirty little girl, and that, like, might get me off one day,
yeah.
but it requires the context of being already aroused, and then, like, oh, yes, that, like, drives me insane. But if
Mm-hmm.
you were to say, if we're walking along the street in front of my family, I'm like, oh, why would you say that? Like, so
No.
yeah, so like understanding the context of the things that, turn you on
Mhm.
is what will create pleasure for you. So context always matters.
Yeah, and you know what? I think back over like partners that I've had, which in my adult history of sexual experiences, and sometimes you just have like this instant, I've had an experience before where like a guy kissed me and I was like, oh no, like I know
Mm-hmm.
this is
Mm-hmm.
gonna be like incredible, this,
Mm-hmm.
and we went on a couple dates and then we got to the sex part, and it was so and this is, it's interesting too, thinking back to just like those experiences that stick out in your mind, even if someone doesn't, it's a little
Exactly.
bit lost, like
Mm-hmm.
thinking back, to this one date, like this guy, he kissed me outside of the train station. When he kissed me, I was like, holy crap, like I know
Mm-hmm.
that we have
Yeah. That's
chemistry. And
great.
then
In that situation, it would be amazing for you or anyone
mhm,
specifically to just reflect on those peak experiences, those peak erotic experiences.
mhm,
What about that had me so juicy? What about that had my pussy purring? Like what about that
yeah,
had me really want more and say like yes, yeah, more please. So
yeah,
it's really beautiful for someone that's kind of starting this journey or just doesn't really matter what stage you are, but someone that wants just to know and recreate more pleasurable experiences. Reflect on the ones in the past that created those peaks for you. Okay, like for example, I remember having an experience when I was younger and we were outside and we actually ended up having sex. I was like, okay, well, what about being outside
mhm,
created such a peak experience for me? And like for me, being like a little bit of a rebel, it was like having this idea of almost getting caught,
yeah.
but understanding though at the same time, if I got caught, it would have been game over. It would not have been
Yeah,
fun anymore because now
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
no,
Yeah, like
it's
you
just
got
the
away
I
with it. Breaking the rules.
e- exactly, and those are
Yeah.
very common things for so many people to get that charge, that arousal from. Obviously, like for obvious reasons, like sex is taboo, and it's nice because in our own interesting kind of way of being human and just the way eroticism works with the mystery and like the just all these other aspects with our brain, we actually like that it's taboo. If sex wasn't so taboo, there'd be so many aspects that just wouldn't be a turn on. So just knowing this about yourself and giving yourself the grace as well, because exploring fantasies and peak experiences can sometimes be a like, ooh, I want to get gang banged. Oh my god! So like these are like really real fantasies, but
Mhm.
sometimes they're not needed to be acted out. But just understanding that these are ways to just know yourself a little bit better and what actually feels good to you, what you want to act out, what you don't want to act out. And just understanding like how can I move forward with this information and what do I want to do with it.
Okay, that is so helpful. Another thing is how, I mean, we kind of were talking about this, but I'm just thinking about like gaining more confidence in the bedroom. We talked about
Mm-hmm.
like self pleasure. We talked about thinking about experiences. And then on that note, getting more confidence and then being able to communicate it to your partner. Is there anything
Mm-hmm.
that you can think of that we didn't already mention that, might be a little bit helpful for a woman out there that maybe is a little bit more shy? Or I guess it depends too on how you grew up, because we, like you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned too, we all have, whether it's religious, whether it's societal limitations put on us and expectations put on us that prevent us from even feeling okay to explore our sensuality or our
Mm-hmm.
sexuality in fear of being judged or criticized or guilt or shamed for it.
Yeah.
Anything else that comes to mind
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
on that note?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. So, the one thing that I feel is very important for our own self exploration in any area of life, but really specifically in our sexuality, is curiosity and compassion. Because there's too often where we'll kind of bump up against our own edges, or something that just you're like, oh my god, like kind of mentioned earlier with the kind of like exploring our fantasies and being a little like the shock value of like, oh my god, what does this mean about me? Or like trying to push these things away because it's eliciting and maybe an uncomfortable sensation in our body.
Mhm.
But just getting curious about it, because it's not uncommon for these uncomfortable sensations to be brought up from an experience or a word even, or the fantasy or, what, or something that our partner brings to us. But on the other side of that is usually, a past experience that we would have had that was uncomfortable. Maybe something awful did happen. And, there's a bit of understanding and just knowing what trauma awareness is and knowing your past experience and things like that. But just having yourself the grace and the compassion to kind of sit with that for a moment, obviously give yourself space, but also just inviting deeper curiosity. Because I can't tell you how many times in my own personal exploration where I was just like, nope, fuck that. That's a hell no for me. But then developing my own mindfulness with sensations specifically, I just got curious with it. Even with my thoughts too, like, oh, that's a really negative thought, Chelsea. Why are you judging yourself? Like, why do you think getting spanked by a whip is so awful? And just like things like that, right? And I got curious and I ended up learning about myself, like, holy shit, like I actually fucking love that stuff. But I was so stuck on shaming and judging myself because of past experience of what I was told of what sex should look like, or, I was told before that there's something wrong with me. I pushed that part of myself away. And then once I gave myself the compassion and the curiosity to kind of lean into that a little bit more in really safe spaces, like I didn't just do this on my own. There was really safe spaces from a coach and a mentor. And doing that, I was able to experience the most ecstasy, the most inner knowing and connection to myself from those very things that I was so triggered by or just tried to push away immediately. So giving yourself compassion, first of all, and just having the curiosity to go there within yourself.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about, because you are in a relationship, you have been with your partner for years, many years, over a decade. I was just thinking about this because I had this conversation with a friend this past weekend about being with someone for a very long time, like even, twice as long as you've been with your partner, figuring out how to want to have sex with your partner and want to keep things fresh, or explore more with them, and not just I guess I've heard so many times from married women especially that who wants steak every night for dinner, and I got so mad at one of my friends for saying that about her husband, because I'm like, first of all, you're just like putting negativity on your sexual experience with your husband. Like, don't say that to him all the time, like, anyways. But so it's very common for, and you hear it a lot of times. I was with a group of guys this past weekend too, that they were saying they hear their friends that they don't even have sex at all with their wife, but maybe like once or twice a year. And especially if they have kids, it obviously when you have kids, it changes the dynamic of your relationship. So basically, what I want to know, you mentioned a little bit about it before in your own personal experience, but what are common things that you see in relationships, and how do you guide couples or women into reigniting that passion and not letting that die with them and their partner? Because, sex doesn't make a relationship last. It certainly, if everything else isn't working, sex can't save the relationship, but it sure can drive a wedge between you and your partner. So what can you say to women out there that might be experiencing this, or even men that maybe want to help cultivate a better sexual relationship with their partner, especially in years?
Yeah. This is a great question. So thank you for asking this. So I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I'll kind of like build up to that. So one thing is just understanding that sexual energy is an amplifier. So if, the foundation of your relationship isn't sturdy, you don't have like the house, the foundation of a house, it's got like a crack, or, there's something, something going on, and you introduce sexual energy, it's going to amplify that. So, if there's miscommunication, there's some resentment, there's hurts in the past, there's already this layer of not being sensitive to your lover, that's going to amplify it in the sexual experience. Now, on the flip side, if you have a solid hearth, that foundation is just like rock solid. You can put anything on top of that and nothing's happened. And the earthquake, you're good.
Mm-hmm.
Sexual energy is going to amplify that. And it's going to be divine.
Mm-hmm.
So in this respect, when I'm hearing couples talk about sex is boring, or, like it's just not to the quality or caliber that is pleasing them, that's making them want more, then I would just question how the relationship is in its entirety. Not in
Mm-hmm.
a way of like pointing fingers or blaming, but more so in an aspect of, okay, what can I hold myself accountable for? Where can I communicate my needs more? What do I need? What do I like? So just like really getting clear within your own body, mind, and honest with yourself. Now, the aspect of boring, this is something I was talking about very recently, where it's like, if you're bored with your partner, that's on you. This is an invitation for more creativity and communication and just like getting honest. Okay, like what am I actually bored about?
Mm-hmm.
Because boredom, and then, like I mentioned before, it's like this aspect of like this like distracted world. We are constantly looking for newness and things to entertain us. It's not our partner's role to entertain us or even please us for that matter. So getting really honest in that respect, like, okay, where am I using this as a cop out? What can I do to create a new experience where it does feel new or exciting or juicy or whatever? So getting really honest there. And something that I do recommend clients as well is like, and I find this is like where like the unconscious expectations kind of happen, is like when we're in relationship, especially when we've been with someone for a decade, more than that, we unconsciously develop these ways of being. We create these sexual habits we are completely unaware of. We get together and we immediately go through the motions the same way we've been doing it for decades. And we're not even realizing it because it's just normal. You're kind of just like in our own little soup. It's like a fish that's in water doesn't realize they're in water. It's kind of like in that kind of respect.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two ways that I address this, and one of them, I'm going to repeat this on my little soapbox. It's just essentially mindfulness, like getting incredibly present, aware, and sensitive and non-reactive to every subtle sensation that we have in our mind and our body, so that we're not avoiding maybe the discomfort that we're feeling in our pussy, to the point where as soon as our partner starts jackhammering, we're checking out because we're like, oh my god, here he goes again, this is the same way he's been doing. Actually getting, okay, like my body's telling me maybe I don't really like this, so I'm just going to ask him like, babe, can we pause? Can you just breathe with me for a little bit? Let's just take it a little bit slower. Let's try something different, and just really connecting with our bodies. So one aspect is just, getting super comfortable with them and going through the motion, being mechanical, and just going to those same habits, the same sexual habits. And that is what makes boring sex. And then two, it's this other layer of, we kind of fall into this like, it's my partner, he's my partner, and we lose the aspect of being lovers.
Mm-hmm.
And there is such a language is such a powerful thing. Like, I try my best never to call my partner, and like really lean on like my boo or like
Yeah.
bae, or just like these cute little pet names, but it has such a powerful unconscious way to entrain how you feel towards them.
So
Right?
good.
So that's
So
something,
good.
yeah, and it's so subtle, but it is so important. So
And
just go ahead.
on that note, before you finish this, because on that note too, like the way that people are like my wife, my
Yes.
husband, like if you even just stop and think about that right there, like the negative connotation that like is
Yes.
maybe unconscious and underlying to, like you just said, those labels that you label your
Mm-hmm.
partner, whether it's oh my husband, oh my
Mm-hmm.
wife, she's my wife, like even people
Mm-hmm.
speak about their partner that way. So even catching yourself right there. Sorry, continue.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'm glad you emphasized that, because it is powerful. And I do hear it a lot, especially like in passing when I go to a restaurant, or like, oh, the old ball and chain. It's like, no,
Yeah.
like, do you realize the feeling and like the what you're unconsciously embedding into your somatic body when
Mm-hmm.
you think about your lover? And if you expect when you go into bed that that's going to change, especially just like that, it's
Mm-hmm.
not. So we continuously kind of like embed these textures with our lovers. And so that's just like a really profound thing to, okay, like when I think about my partner, what am I feeling? Like, what am I actually, what's the feeling, the texture that comes up in my body? So these are just like two things to get really honest with yourself, and a good place to start.
So good. And then even when you were speaking about this, I think we can't say it enough. The self-pleasure, especially when
Mm-hmm.
you're with somebody for such a long time, put the vibrator away, ladies, and start to touch yourself, even touching your own skin, because I think if you've been in a relationship and you've been in a routine for so long that you might not even really know what feels good to you
Mm-hmm.
outside of the autopilot that you've been living in for all these years,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe starting to learn to explore to really get to know what feels good for you, and then going to your partner and, again, like you mentioned, saying something different, like saying, like, before we even start, I want to, like, let's, like, I thought about this with my lover that I've had recently,
Mm-hmm.
that just getting them to be present with you before you even start to
Yes.
go anywhere. If you're gonna, like, you're together and you're like, okay, we want to have sex, like, just pause and put your phones away from out of the
Mm-hmm.
bedroom, and then maybe even breathe together might be a way to get, you spoke about mindfulness and get present, like,
Mm-hmm.
switch up your routine, yeah, and make it more of like a ritual than like, oh, I'm gonna have sex with my husband.
Yeah, the obligatory sex is the fastest way to kill your libido and your desire for your partner. So another thing is just being really honest with where you're at, and if you're not ready for penetration or ready for sex, what do you need to be there? And just being honest, like, like, okay, babe, I what I actually need is for you to breathe with me right now, and I know my body will feel more open to, to connect with you. What I need right now is just for you to look into my eyes and tell me you've missed me all day or something. Just like really getting honest about like, what do I need? And this is something that I tell my clients, like, what do you need to feel open to turn on? And it's like, okay, like, yeah, what do I need? And that in itself is vulnerable. So like, just again, kind of going back to the fear of intimacy and just like being honest, okay, woo, it's a little risky, and just kind of leaning into it a little bit more.
This was so helpful, and I could sit here and talk to you for the next, like, 5 hours, but I'm not gonna do that to you. And how do you work with your clients? In what capacity do you do, like, single sessions? Do you have a program that you put them on? Maybe just to familiarize our listeners with how you work.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, I do have like a lot of self study things, like just smaller kind of like microdoses, what I like to call them, for women to kind of warm up to my energy and start to open in their own sexual essence. So I have like a bunch of like little one off things like that, that I personally just love. I love them. And then I also have my one on one mentoring and coaching. So those are for women that um know that in their heart of hearts that they're ready to go all in and opening up into their sexual expression and really experiencing a deep change in their relationship in the way that they're having sex.
Amazing. And then if someone wanted to get in touch with you, where could they find you on social media, websites, all that, all
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
information?
absolutely. So I'm most active on Instagram. It's at chelsbra.com, or sorry, at chelsbra, CHELSBRA. And then my website as well at chelsbra.
Chelsy Bra, perfect. And Chelsy is your name. Chelsy, I
Yep.
didn't say your last name. I didn't introduce your last name.
Browse, Chelsy Browse. Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure you give it away. Perfect. Chelsy, thank you so, so much for all the amazing information. This flew by. I didn't
Yeah, it
want to
did.
keep you for too long, but I swear I could have kept talking for another hour or two. But thank you so much. And I'm so happy that we were able to connect today and share all this great information with everyone listening on the Inner Beauty Code. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Thank you so much for all your beautiful questions. And I know your audience is loving the work that you're doing too. Thank you.